In the previous class, we have discussed about discharge of a contract. What is discharge of a contract? It is the termination of the contractual relationship between the parties. There are different modes of discharge. A contract can be discharged by performance of contract, by agreement, by lapse of time, then discharge by operation of law, discharge by impossibility of performance, and the last one, discharge by breach of contract. So these are the six different ways of or six different modes of discharge. The first two ones we have discussed in the previous class, that is discharge by performance of contract and discharge by agreement. The rest four that we are going to discuss in this video. The third mode of discharge is discharge by lapse of time. When a period is specified for the performance of the contract, it is known as period of limitation. So period of limitation means it is the specific date that is specified for the performance of the contract. For example, 12th June 2020. So that is a specific date for the performance of the contract, and that's called a period of limitation. If the contract is not performed and no legal action is taken by the promisee within the period of limitation, the contract is said to be terminated. So there will be a specific date for the performance of the contract. If the contract is not performed and no action is taken by the promisee, then we can say it is discharged by lapse of time. So every contract must be performed within the specified period. That period is called a period of limitation. If the contract is not performed and the promisee fails to take any action within the period of limitation, then the contract is terminated or discharged by lapse of time. For example, to file a money suit, the period of limitation is 3 years. That means the person can sue only within 3 years. And if the creditor fails to file a suit within this time, if he files a suit after the 3rd year, then the debtor is discharged because the contract is discharged by lapse of time. If a time is specified for the performance of the contract, and if it is not performed and no action is taken by the promisee within that period, then it's called a discharge by lapse of time. The fourth way or fourth mode of discharge is discharge by operation of law. So what is discharge by operation of law? Which means the law itself discharges the contract. In certain circumstances, the law itself discharges the contract. That's called a discharge by operation of law. So I'm going to explain the different cases where a contract is discharged by operation of law. The very first circumstance is death. If a contract is based upon the personal skill and qualification of the promisor, then it will be terminated on the death of the promisor. That means where a performance of a contract is required to be made in person and the personal skill or qualification of the promisor are important, then the death of the promisor discharges the contract. If death happens or if the death of the promisor discharges the contract. The second situation is insolvency. What is insolvency or insolvent? It is a situation where the court of law declares a person as unable to pay the debts. So insolvency and discharge by operation of law. If a person is adjudicated insolvent by a competent court, then all his rights as well as his liabilities are vested with the official receiver, and the insolvent is discharged from all his rights and liabilities arising from all his earlier contract. If the court of law declares a person as insolvent, then all his rights and liabilities are transferred to another person. That's called the official assignee or official receiver. In such a situation also, the person is discharged from the contract. Then the third one is material alteration. If the document containing the terms of the contract is materially altered by a party to contract without the consent of the other parties, the contract is discharged. So if one party in the contract is altering the terms of the contract, I mean the document that contains the terms of the contract, if he is altering that document, then also the contract is discharged. Then fourth one is merger of rights. So it's a condition by which the inferior right contract merges into a superior right contract. For example, where a part-time lecture is made full-time. So inferior right is, or inferior right contract merges with a superior right contract. Inferior right means he was a part-time lecturer, now he is a full-time lecturer. That means superior right. So the contract of part-time lectureship is discharged by merger. That contract, the previous contract is discharged and new contract is made. So these are the four situations where the law itself discharges the contract. Death of the promisor, insolvency. Insolvency means the court declares a person who is unable to pay the debts. Then material alteration. If one party alter the document that contains the terms of the contract, then also the contract is discharged. And the fourth situation, merger of rights. Merger of rights means it is a condition by which inferior right of a contract or inferior right contract is merged into a superior right contract. In this case, inferior right contract or the previous contract stand discharged automatically. So this is discharged by operation of law, and these are the four situations. The fifth method is discharge by impossibility of performance. What is impossibility of performance? Sometimes the performance of a contract is or become impossible due to its own nature or due to some reasons which are beyond the control of the parties. That's called a discharge by impossibility of performance. Sometimes a contract is discharged when the performance of the contract become impossible, and it can be due to its own nature or due to some reasons that we can control. That's called a discharge by impossibility of performance. The contract is not possible to perform. The impossibility is of the following two types. One is initial impossibility and the second one is subsequent impossibility. What is initial impossibility? The name itself indicates it is when the impossibility exists at the time of formation of the contract. It's called initial impossibility. Initial means at the starting stage, when the impossibility exists at the time of formation of the contract, that's called a initial impossibility. And there are two types of initial impossibility. One is non-impossibility, other one is unknown impossibility. Initial impossibility means it is the impossibility exists at the time of formation of a contract. Non-impossibility means it is impossibility which is known to the parties at the time of making contract. If the parties have a complete picture or complete idea regarding the impossibility at the time of making the contract, then it's called a non-impossibility. The parties is known. Then unknown. Unknown impossibility means it is an impossibility which is not known to any of the party at the time of making the agreement. Please note that no one knows means both the parties have no idea regarding the impossibility at the time of making the contract or making the agreement, then it's called a unknown impossibility. So the very first impossibility is initial impossibility. It exists at the time of forming the contract. Then there are two types of initial impossibilities. Non-impossibility. Non-impossibility is an impossibility which is known to the parties at the time of making the contract. If the impossibility which is not known to the any of the party, please underline that, which is not known to any of the party at the time of making the agreement, then it's called a unknown impossibility. For example, an example for initial impossibility. X agrees to pay Y rupees 10,000 and Y in return promises to bring the moon from heaven for X. So in this case, the impossibility is known to the parties and it starts from, it exists at the time of forming the contract. Another example for unknown impossibility. Unknown impossibility is an impossibility which is not known to any of the party. For example, X agrees to sell his car to Y, but unknown to both the parties that the car had already been destroyed by fire even at the time of entering into the contract. So the contract becomes void. So both the parties have no idea regarding the car. X is agreed to sell his car to Y, but unknown to both the parties that the car had already been destroyed. So it's a unknown impossibility. The second impossibility is subsequent impossibility. Subsequent impossibility means when the performance of the contract is possible at the time of formation but subsequently becomes impossible due to some event which is beyond the control of the parties. So, subsequent impossibility means when the performance of the contract is possible at the time of forming the contract but it is not, but subsequently it becomes impossible. That is called a subsequent impossibility. So there are two types of impossibilities. Initial impossibility, that means it is impossibility exists at the time of forming the contract. Then subsequent impossibility means there is no impossibility while forming the contract, but subsequently it becomes impossible due to some reasons and which are beyond the control of parties. That's called a subsequent impossibility. So sometimes the performance of a contract becomes impossible due to its own nature or due to some reasons which are beyond the control of the parties. Then it's called a discharge by impossibility of performance. There's a term called a doctrine of frustration. What is doctrine of frustration? The concept of supervening impossibilities is known as doctrine of frustration in English law. So what is supervening impossibilities? As a performance of an agreement become impossible or unlawful after making it due to some event and which is beyond the control of the parties, then it's called a doctrine of supervening or subsequent impossibility. So another name for subsequent impossibility is called a doctrine of supervening. Doctrine of supervening means the performance of an agreement becomes impossible due to some event and which is beyond the control of the parties. That is subsequent impossibility. And another name for subsequent impossibility is doctrine of supervening. So what is doctrine of frustration? Doctrine of frustration means the performance becomes impossible legally or physically. This is called a doctrine of frustration. Again, I am starting with the doctrine of supervening. Doctrine of supervening means the contract becomes impossible due to some event which is beyond the control of the parties. That's called the doctrine of supervening or subsequent impossibility. This concept in English law, it is called the doctrine of frustration. The performance becomes impossible legally or physically. That's called the doctrine of frustration. It is called a doctrine of frustration because the parties are prevented from further performance and they becomes disappointed. Frustration, it's a disappointment, right? Due to the fact that the contract can be performed, they become disappointed. So the disappointment due to non-performance of the contract under compulsion from the impossibility is called the doctrine of frustration. Then the different cases of supervening or subsequent impossibility or frustration. Now we are moving to look at what are the cases where supervening or subsequent impossibility exist. The very first situation is destruction of the subject matter of the contract. If the subject matter of the contract subsequent to its formation, so after its formation, is destroyed without any fault of the parties to the contract, then that contract is said to be discharged. So if the subject matter of the contract is destroyed, then without any, please underline that, without any fault of the parties, then that contract is discharged. For example, X agrees to sell his scooter to Y. Before the transfer, the scooter is destroyed by an accident. So the contract is discharged by impossibility of performance. X agrees to sell his scooter to Y. So there is a contract between X and Y. And before the transfer, the scooter is destroyed by an accident. It is not without any fault of the parties, the subject matter is destroyed. So the contract is discharged by impossibility of performance. The next one is death or personal incapacity of the party. A promise requiring personal skill and ability may become physically incapable of performance by reason of the death or incapacity of the same person. So such impossibility discharges the promiser from liability. If the promiser, if a promise requires the personal skill of the promiser, and if it become incapable, or if the party is incapable of performing the contract, it can be due to the death or incapacity, then in that case also the contract is discharged. For example, a piano player contracts to play at musical entertainment program. He falls seriously ill on the specific date, then the contract is discharged, because for conducting the entertainment program, the personal skill of the promiser is needed. If he is incapable of performing that, then that contract is discharged. The third situation is change of law. So contract which was lawful at the time of its making, but became unlawful later by reason of change in law, becomes impossible of performance. If there is any change in law occurs after forming the contract, then also the contract is said to be discharged. For example, A agrees to sell his land to B. A agrees to sell his land to B. Later, the land is acquired by the government. Now the contract becomes void. While forming the contract, it was lawful, but after forming the contract, it became unlawful because the government acquired the land. Now we can't sell it to B. So the contract becomes void on the ground of impossibility of performance. The fourth situation is declaration of war. When war is declared, After the formation of the contract, all pending contracts with the residents of the enemy country remain suspended. For example, a contract to take in cargo for B at a foreign port. As A's government afterwards declare war against the country in which the port is situated, the contract becomes void when war is declared. So A is making a contract with B to take the cargo for B at a foreign port. Now, after forming the contract, what happened was A's government declares war against that country in which the port is situated. Now, it is not possible to perform the contract. In such situations, this contract may be enforced after the end of the war at the option of government. So, the approval of government is needed after the end of war. So, these are the 4 situations where the law declares a contract is discharged by supervening impossibility. When destruction of subject matter occurs, then death or personal incapacity of the party, then change of law and declaration of war. Then what are the situations where the doctrine of supervening impossibility is not an excuse? The rule is that a contract is discharged on the ground of impossibility, which arises subsequent to its formation. But there are certain exceptions to this rule. What is that? The very first one is difficulty of performance. What is difficulty of performance? A contract is not discharged by reason of the fact that the performance is more difficult, more expensive, more burden, or less profitable than that agreed at the time of its formation. So we can't escape from a contract by saying that it is difficult to perform the contract. Difficulty of performance is not an excuse for discharging the contract. For example, A agrees to supply sand to B with a certain period. Due to some government restrictions of taking sand from riverside, A fails to supply in time. However, the sand is available in the open market from where A could have obtained it. So A pleads that it was burdensome for him to obtain the sand from the open market. Here, A will not be discharged on the ground of supervening impossibility. Simply, we can't escape from a contract by saying that it is difficult to perform. After forming the contract, after forming the contract, we can't escape from a contract by purely saying the reason it is difficult to perform. So, difficulty of performance is not an excuse. Then, second one is commercial impossibility. What is commercial impossibility? Performance cannot be excused on the ground of commercial impossibility. Commercial impossibility means non-availability of raw material, increased cost of production, labor shortage, power shortage. These are called commercial impossibility. And we can't excuse it on the ground of commercial impossibility. Let me explain an example. A agrees to supply certain goods to B. A and B are making a contract. A agrees to supply certain goods to B, but due to increase in the cost of raw materials and wages, it is not beneficial to A to supply the goods at the agreed rate. In this ground, A cannot be excused for non-performance. So after forming the contract, a person can't end the contract or discharge the contract by saying the commercial impossibilities. What are commercial impossibilities? Non-availability of raw material, increased cost of production, increased labor charge, increased power shortage. These are some examples for commercial impossibility. Once the contract is formed, they have to continue with that or they have to perform it. They can't escape from the contract by saying commercial impossibilities. The third situation, default of a third party. When when a contract could not be performed because of the default of the third person on whose work or conduct the promisor relied, the promisor is not discharged on the ground of frustration. For example, A agrees to supply B certain computer components on the belief that C will import them from China. So A is making contract with B. A agrees to supply B certain computer components. He is making the contract on the belief that C will import them from China. So A is depending on a third party, that is the C. Later on, C fails to import the components. Here A is not discharged from this application and A is liable to B for damage. So default of a third party is not an excuse. In the example, A has to give damages, or means B can claim for damages if such a situation occurs. So default of a third party is not an excuse for discharging the contract. The fourth situation is strikes, lockouts and civil disturbances. A contract is not discharged automatically on the ground of supervening impossibility due to a strike by the workers or lockout by the owners or outbreak of some civil disturbances coming in the way of the performance of the contract. It says that strikes, lockouts, civil disturbances are not a reason for stopping the contract. Let me explain an example. A agrees to supply to B certain steel chairs within a specified period. A is making contract with B that A will supply certain steel chairs within a specified period. However, due to some strike by workers, the factory production was withheld for a weeks. A is not discharged from his obligation to B on the ground of supervening and he is liable for damages. If A can't supply the chairs on time, then B can claim for damages because A is not free from the not escaping. A can't escape from the contract by saying supervening impossibility. So strikes, lockout, civil disturbance is not an excuse. The second last one is failure of one of the objects or partial impossibility. When a contract is entered into for several objects, failure of one of the object does not terminate the contract. For example, A hired a tourist car from B with the object of, there are mainly two objectives. One is attending a seminar at Kovalam and enjoying a picnic. The second one is enjoying a picnic with his family in and around Kovalam. So A hired a tourist car from B with the object of attending a seminar at Kovalam and enjoying a picnic with his family. So B came to know that the seminar had been cancelled. Later, B came to know that the seminar had been cancelled. Then in such a situation, he did not provide the tourist car to A because B is not excused from his obligation and he is liable for damages. So failure of one of the object is not an excuse to terminate the contract if one or more objectives are there. The last one is self-induced impossibility. Where the impossibility is due to default of the contracting party himself, the contract do not get discharged. Self-induced means the default which is made by the contracting party himself. Default of the contracting party himself, then the contract is not discharged. So these are the situations, or these are the cases where the doctrine of supervening impossibility is not an excuse. We can't escape from a contract by saying it is difficult to perform or by commercial impossibility or default of third party. then strike, lockout, civil disturbances. Then if there are more than one of the more than one objects are there, then failure of one of the object is not a reason. Then self-induced impossibility, where impossibility is due to the default of the contracting party. The last mode of discharge is discharge by breach of contract. What is breach of contract? Breach of contract means breaking the obligation which a contract imposes. Breach means failure of a party to perform his obligations under a contract is called a breach of contract. The parties who do not take steps for performance of a contract without sufficient reason may result in breach of contract. If the party fails to perform his obligations under a contract, then it's called a breach of contract. The breach of contract may be actual breach or anticipated breach. So what is breach? I think the idea is clear. Breach of contract means breaking the obligations, or one party fails to perform his obligations under a contract is called a breach of contract. Breaking the obligation is called a breach of contract. If the parties who do not take step for performance of a contract without sufficient reason, it can result into breach of contract. There are two types of breach. One is actual breach and the second one is anticipated breach. What is actual breach of contract? Actual breach of contract takes place when a party to a contract refuses or fails to perform his obligations when it is due. Actual breach means breaking the obligations. When a party to a contract refuses or he is failed to perform his obligations when it is due, it's called a actual breach. So at the time of performing the obligation, when one party refuses or one party fails to perform it, it's called a actual breach. It can happen in following ways. One is on the due date of performance and during the course of performance. What is on the due date of performance and during the course of performance? If actual breach of a contract, the person fails to perform his part of contract when performance is due, it's called on the due date of performance. And when a person fails to perform his part during the course of performance, then it's called actual breach during the course of performance. Then what is anticipatory or constructive breach of contract? Anticipatory breach of contract occurs when the promisor declares his intention of not performing the promise before the time of performance is due. Actual breach means the party declares or the party fails to perform his obligation when it is due. If one party declares his intention of not performing the promise before the time of performance is due, then it's called an anticipatory breach. So when a party to contract refuses to perform his obligation before the due date, it's called an anticipatory breach of contract. And if the party fails to perform his obligation when it is due, it's called an actual breach. For example, an example for anticipatory or constructive breach: A agrees to supply 5 bags of sugar to B on the 1st of March. But before this date, say in the second week of February, he informed B that he is not going to supply the sugar. So this is an anticipatory breach of contract, because the party declares his intention of not performing the contract before the time of performance is due. If he fails to perform when it is due, it's called an actual breach. So these are the two different types of breach of contract: actual breach and anticipatory breach. Actual breach may take place in the following ways: on the due date of performance and during the course of performance. An anticipatory breach means it is otherwise known as constructive breach, When the promisor declares his intention of not performing the promise before the time for performance is due, then it's called an anticipatory breach. So, what is the consequence of anticipatory breach? The consequence is that the promisor either to treat the whole contract as broken and claim for damages, and wait for the due date and hold that the other party responsible for all the consequence of non-performance.